The research station on Verdantia was little more than a cluster of domed buildings, perched on the edge of the Jigaram Plains. David, the station's head botanist, was scanning the vibrant, alien foliage through his binoculars when he noticed something moving, something distinctly not plant-like. "Mike, come take a look at this," David called to his colleague, a rugged geologist with a keen sense of humor. Mike ambled over, his eyes curious. "What's up?" Mike asked, squinting into the direction David pointed. "Over there by the silverleaf cluster. I saw movement, not wind-driven, something different." Mike grabbed the spare binoculars hanging around his neck, training them on the spot. "I'll be damned. Looks like you're right. Should we call this in?" David hesitated, his policy always to observe first. "Let's wait a moment. Could be a new animal species." As they watched, figures emerged from the shadows of the towering silverleaf trees, slender, bipedal beings with translucent skin that shimmered in the sunlight. Their eyes were wide and expressive, flickering with cautious interest as they approached the human-made boundaries. "Definitely not animals," Mike murmured, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. "Looks like we've got intelligent life." David nodded, lowering his binoculars. He grabbed his communicator. "This is David at Station Alpha, requesting immediate assistance. We have potential first contact." They didn't have to wait long. Curiosity was as much a vice as a virtue among researchers. Soon a small team, including the station commander, James, joined them at the observation deck. James, a seasoned leader with years of experience in interstellar diplomacy, assessed the situation. "Keep calm, everyone. Let's not startle them." "David, Mike, you spotted them. Any aggressive movements?" "None, Commander. They seem as curious about us as we are about them," David replied. The aliens ventured closer, their movements graceful and unhurried. One of them, slightly taller than the rest, stepped forward. The creature's chest glowed with a soft light, rhythmic like a heartbeat. "Hello," David said gently, stepping towards the boundary. His voice was calm, his hands spread in a universal gesture of peace. The leading alien tilted its head, mimicking the greeting. "Hello," it echoed in a melodic tone, the voice clear but otherworldly. "Do you understand us?" Mike asked, his tone friendly. "Yes," the alien responded, its voice gaining confidence. "We learn. You speak, we listen." James exchanged a look with his team, his expression a mixture of relief and fascination. "I'm James, the commander of this facility. We mean you no harm. I am Zara," the alien introduced herself. "We watch. We curious." David smiled. "We are curious too, Zara. This is a significant moment for both our peoples." Mike chuckled lightly. "Yeah, and let's not mess it up by saying something stupid, huh?" Zara's companions, two others who remained a few steps back, whispered among themselves, their tones musical. It was clear they were discussing their next steps. "May we come closer?" Zara asked, her gaze fixed on James. "Please," James gestured, stepping back to give them space. As Zara and her companions crossed the invisible line dividing the alien terrain from human territory, David felt the weight of the moment. This was the beginning of something extraordinary, a first step into a shared future, unpredictable but full of potential. "How long have you been watching us?" David inquired as they approached. "Since you arrived," Zara replied. "We fearful at first, now hopeful." The exchange continued, each question and answer weaving a fragile thread of trust between them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with colors no human had ever named, David realized that Verdantia was no longer just a research outpost. It was a meeting ground for two civilizations, stepping out of the shadows of fear and into the light of understanding. In the weeks that followed first contact, the human researchers and the Ilari made cautious advances in their communication. David had set up an informal classroom inside one of the larger communal tents, and it was here that he and Zara spent many hours exchanging words and phrases. "Okay, Zara, this is a leaf," David said, holding up a green specimen from a nearby plant. "Leaf," Zara repeated carefully, her luminous eyes scrutinizing the object before touching it gently with her slender fingers. "And in your language?" David asked, notebook ready. "We call it Selen," she replied. David noted it down, then pointed to the ground. An earth. Terran, Zura said. Mike walked in just as David was about to continue, holding 2 steaming cups of something aromatic. Thought you might want a break. Made my special hot chocolate. Don't worry, Zara, I checked. It's safe for Ilari. Zara accepted the cup cautiously, sniffing it curiously. She took a tentative sip, then smiled. It's good. Warm. We have similar. Grilla. Grilla, huh? I'll need to try that sometime. Mike chuckled, settling down beside them. He looked at David. How's the vocab lesson going? Pretty good. We're picking up a lot from each other. It's fascinating how many words they have for things we'd never think twice about, David shared, his enthusiasm evident. The lesson turned into a casual conversation, with each taking turns to describe their planet's customs, foods, and traditions. Zara was particularly interested in human expressions of joy and celebration. What do you do to celebrate? Zara asked. We have music, dancing, we eat special meals, David began. Like birthdays. We celebrate those every year to mark someone's life, Mike interjected, eager to share. Actually, I've got one coming up soon. Birthday, Zara repeated, trying to wrap her head around the concept. Yeah, the day you were born. It's a big deal for us. Friends, family gather to celebrate you, Mike explained. Ilari celebrate the cycle, Zara said. When all planets align. It is rare. Much joy. James entered the tent during the discussion, his presence commanding yet comforting. How are our diplomats doing here? Learning lots, Commander, David replied with a grin. Zara's practically fluent in human now. That's great to hear. We'll need to prepare for a formal meeting soon. The more we understand each other, the smoother this will go, James said, looking towards Zara. Think your people would be open to that? Zara nodded. Yes, we eager. Want understanding. Fantastic. Let's plan for that then. David, keep up the lessons. Mike, maybe throw in some cultural exchange activities. We need to present our best. Got it, boss, Mike said, giving a thumbs up, a gesture Zara mimicked, albeit with a slightly puzzled look. As the session wrapped up, David felt a profound sense of accomplishment and anticipation. The barriers between their worlds were slowly dissolving, replaced by a bridge built on words and shared experiences. They all stood together for a moment, looking at the setting sun through the tent's open flap. Beautiful, isn't it? David remarked. Very, Zara agreed. Much like your words. They paint worlds. Mike clapped David on the back. Looks like you're more poet than botanist these days. David laughed, shaking his head. Just trying to make sure we get this right. The stakes are too high not to. As the light faded and the stars began to appear in the sky, the humans and Zara continued to chat, each learning more than just language, but also the essence of being. Each word, each shared smile was a step closer to true understanding. The next step in fostering relations came in the form of a shared expedition. The human team decided to invite Zara and a couple of her companions to join a botanical survey in the field. It was a practical session intended to extend the classroom exchanges into the living canvas of Verdantia's wilderness. David, Mike, and Zara were accompanied by Tom, an ecologist whose expertise in alien ecosystems was unparalleled in the colony. They set off early, just as Verdantia's twin suns peaked above the horizon, casting a surreal glow over the landscape. So, Zara, this plant here, Tom began, crouching next to a fern-like specimen with luminous fronds. We've observed it exhibits some interesting nocturnal behaviors. What do you call it? Ah, that is a night whisperer. It speaks more when dark, Zara explained, her voice soft, reflecting the plant's name. Speaks? Tom raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Yes, it releases spores that glow more at night. Communicates with others of its kind, Zara continued, touching the plant gently. The fronds shimmered under her fingers. Bioluminescent communication? Huh? That's fascinating. We've seen similar behavior in fungi on Earth, Tom noted, jotting down observations in his digital pad. Mike, who'd been setting up a portable scanning device, called out, Hey Zara, could you show me any plants your people use for medicine? It'd be great to compare notes on natural remedies. Zara led the way to a cluster of blue-tinged shrubs. We use this for healing. It soothes pain when applied to skin. Interesting, Mike mused, scanning the plant. Looks like it's rich in some kind of analgesic compound. We'll need samples. David, meanwhile, was documenting the interaction on camera, capturing the exchange of knowledge. Zara, have you ever seen any of our Earth plants? I've got a database back at the lab. I have not. I would like that, David, Zara replied, her curiosity clear. The morning passed with each team member sharing their expertise and learning from the other. Tom explained ecological theories, while Mike focused on practical applications like medicinal and nutritional uses of the plants they encountered. As the day warmed, the group decided to rest under the shade of a large, canopy-like tree. It was here that their conversation took a turn from professional to personal. So, Zara, aside from being a guide and teacher to us, what do you enjoy doing? What's fun for an Alari? David asked as he handed out water bottles. Zara thought for a moment, her gaze drifting skyward. I enjoy this silent flight, gliding on air currents with wings. You can fly? Tom looked up from his pad, astonished. Not fly, glide. Small heights. It is freeing, she described, a wistful tone in her voice. That sounds amazing. Humans have always been fascinated with flight, Mike chimed in, smiling at the thought. Maybe you could show us one day? Yes, maybe. Zara nodded, her smile widening. The afternoon was spent in light-hearted camaraderie, the humans fascinated by Zara's descriptions of Alari customs and leisure activities. When it was time to return, nobody really wanted to leave the peaceful camaraderie behind. Walking back, Tom summarized the day. Today was more than just a field trip. It felt like a real step forward. Yeah, building bridges, one word, one plan at a time, David agreed. Mike laughed, clapping David on the shoulder. Look at you, becoming a diplomat in the wild. Zara looked from one to the other, her expression thoughtful. It is good, this sharing. I feel closer to your kind now, and we to yours, David said, realizing the true value of the day was far more than the sum of their notes. They had begun to weave a fabric of trust and friendship, delicate yet strong. The path ahead was still uncertain, but today had proved that it was definitely one worth treading together. David was making final preparations in his lab when Mike walked in, his usual buoyant self slightly subdued. Hey Dave, got a minute? Sure, Mike, what's up? David asked, setting aside a stack of plant samples. I've been thinking about this whole setup with the Alari. It's going beyond research, isn't it? Mike leaned against the lab counter, his gaze serious. David nodded, understanding immediately. Yeah, it's turning into something deeper. I think we're genuinely making friends, maybe even allies in a sense. Exactly. And it's about to get a lot more involved. James wants us to host a small delegation of Alari here next week. Formal introductions, a tour of our facilities. Mike trailed off, watching David's reaction closely. David's eyebrows shot up. That's a big step. Did Zara say how her people feel about it? She's encouraged by it. Thinks it'll foster deeper understanding on both sides, Mike replied, pulling up a chair. But here's the thing. I think we need to do more than just show them our tech and samples. We should share something personal. Show them who we are, not just what we do. Like a cultural exchange? David suggested, warming to the idea. Exactly. Maybe some music, art, even a small feast with foods from Earth, and whatever safe Alari dishes we can manage, Mike said, his enthusiasm returning. David smiled, picturing the event. I like it. Let's pitch it to James. But first, we need to clear it with Zara. Make sure her people would be comfortable with it. Agreed. I'll set up a meeting with her this afternoon, Mike said, standing. This could really be something special, Dave. Later that day, David, Mike, and James met with Zara and two other Alari representatives in the station's conference room. The atmosphere was one of cautious optimism as both sides took seats around a large oval table. James began, We are honored to welcome more of your people here, Zara. We hope this can be a place of shared growth and learning. Zara nodded, her luminous eyes reflecting a seriousness that matched the moment. We are thankful, Commander James. My people are ready to learn, to share. David then took over, laying out the proposal for the cultural exchange. We'd like to make this visit special by sharing aspects of our culture with you. Music, art, and a meal prepared by both our teams. What do you think? Zara turned to her companions, exchanging a few quiet words in their flowing language before responding. We are pleased. We will bring examples of Alari art and music as well. It is good to share not just knowledge, but joy and creativity. Mike clapped his hands, delighted. Fantastic! We'll make it a day to remember. The days leading up to the event were a flurry of activity. David took charge of organizing a display of Earth's natural wonders through VR experiences and digital galleries. Mike, with his knack for logistics, coordinated the menu and layout, ensuring everything was in place. On the day of the event, the research station was transformed. One half of the main hall was dedicated to Earth culture, featuring paintings, sculptures, and a continuous display of various landscapes and cities from around the globe. The other half displayed Ilari culture, with vibrant, intricate artworks that seemed to pulse with life and a series of soft, haunting melodies that filled the air. As the Ilari guests arrived, their awe and appreciation were palpable. They moved through the exhibits with reverence, pausing often to ask questions or share similar concepts from their own culture. David found himself walking with Zara, who seemed particularly taken with a series of photographs of Earth's oceans. "It's like you're a night whisperer," he said, pointing to a picture of bioluminescent waves. "Our planet speaks at night, too." Zara smiled, her expression one of shared wonder. "Yes, I see the light in the water. It is beautiful. It whispers like our Selen." Their conversation deepened as they moved between displays, their earlier connection strengthening with each shared insight and laughter. As the event drew to a close, the air was filled with a sense of accomplishment and hope, a feeling that something significant had been woven between their peoples. "We've started something amazing here, Zara," David said, as they paused outside under the stars. "Yes, David," Zara agreed, her hand lightly touching his arm. "It is only the beginning." After the success of the cultural exchange, the atmosphere at the research station grew more relaxed, but also more charged with possibilities. David found himself thinking about Zara often, about the subtle grace of her expressions and the depth of her intellect. These thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his office door. "Come in," David called, expecting one of his team, but surprised to see James entering instead. "David, do you have a moment?" James asked, closing the door behind him. "Of course, Commander. What's on your mind?" David responded, noting the serious look on James's face. "It's about the Ilari and us." James started, sitting down. "I've noticed the bonds forming, especially between you and Zara. While it's beneficial for our relations, we need to be mindful of the implications. Both cultures are watching us closely now." David nodded, understanding the delicacy of the situation. "I'm aware of that, James. I assure you, my intentions are professional." "Good, but even professional relationships in these circumstances can lead to complications. We need to proceed carefully," James advised, his tone both stern and supportive. David appreciated the concern. "Understood. I'll keep that in mind." Later that day, David joined Mike and Tom for a scheduled video conference with their superiors back on Earth, intended to report on the progress of their mission. "As you can see, the cultural exchange was a success," Tom was saying, displaying images of the event. "We've observed a notable increase in cooperative behavior and enthusiasm from the Ilari." "That's excellent news," one of the directors responded. "Keep nurturing these relationships, but remember the primary goal is peaceful coexistence and understanding." David chimed in, "Absolutely. Every step we take is towards a mutual respect and, hopefully, a lasting peace between our people." The meeting wrapped up with encouragement and a few bureaucratic reminders. After disconnecting, Mike turned to David with a smirk. "So, Mr. Diplomat, ready for the next round of peace talks?" "Funny, Mike," David shot back with a smile. "But yes, I'm actually meeting with Zara later today. We're planning a joint ecological survey." "That's the spirit. Just remember what James said," Mike added, his tone light but his eyes serious. David met with Zara at the edge of the station, where Verdantia's lush landscape began. He carried some of the survey equipment while Zara led the way, her familiarity with the terrain evident. "I am glad for this," Zara began, her voice reflecting a warmth that had grown over their many interactions. "Our people learning from each other. It is how it should be." David agreed. "It's been an eye-opener for me." There's so much we can learn from you. They set up their equipment near a large body of water, taking samples and recording data. As they worked, their conversation veered towards more personal topics. Zara, back during the event, I noticed how moved you were by some of our Earth art, David said, hoping to understand her better. Yes, your art speaks of your world's beauty and struggles. It is powerful, Zara replied, pausing her work to look at him. Ilari art is similar, but we use it to express hopes and dreams. It is important to dream, David. I couldn't agree more, David said, his admiration growing. What do you dream of, Zara? For peace, for understanding, for our children to know a world without fear of the unknown, she answered sincerely. David felt the weight of her words, realizing how deeply their missions intertwined. I share that dream. Maybe together, we're taking the first steps toward making it real. As they continued their work, the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the landscape. The moment felt symbolic, a reflection of their shared vision glowing on the horizon. Thank you, David, for today, Zara said as they packed up. For everything. Thank you, Zara. For opening our eyes and our hearts to the possibilities, David replied, feeling more connected to their purpose than ever. They returned to the station with samples and data, but also with a renewed commitment to their delicate, evolving friendship. The path ahead was uncertain, yet it seemed they were on the right track, guided by shared dreams and the mutual respect that had blossomed between them. The day began like any other, with David and Mike setting out early for another survey mission. They moved through the bioluminescent forest, familiar now with the delicate flora of Verdantia and its myriad species. Zara was supposed to join them for this survey, but she was nowhere to be found. Strange, David muttered, looking around. She's usually here before we even arrive. Maybe she's got other plans? Mike teased, nudging David with a knowing grin. Or maybe she's just avoiding the two of us. Very funny, Mike, David said, shaking his head, but she did say she'd be here. As they continued down the path, David caught sight of Zara in the distance, standing near a grove of tall, silver-leaf trees. She seemed to be waiting, a subtle nervousness in her posture. There she is, David said, waving as they approached. Zara's face lit up when she saw them, though there was something different in her eyes, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. David, Mike, she greeted them softly. I have something to share. Mike raised an eyebrow. Sounds serious. Everything okay? Zara nodded, her gaze settling on David. Yes, it is good news. David, it concerns you too. David's curiosity piqued. All right, Zara, what is it? She took a deep breath, her eyes glowing with a new light. I am with child. I am pregnant. The words hung in the air for a moment, and David felt his heart skip a beat. His mind raced, processing what this meant, not just for him, but for both of their worlds. Pregnant, he repeated, his voice almost a whisper. Are you sure? Yes, Zara said, her smile soft but full of joy. Your child, David. Our child. Mike's eyes widened, his face a mix of shock and amazement. Well, I'll be damned. David, you're going to be a father. David took a step forward, his heart pounding. He reached for Zara's hand, their fingers intertwining. I don't know what to say, Zara. This is incredible. Zara's smile grew, her hand tightening around his. It is new for both of us, but I am happy. This child will be of both our people a bridge. Mike watched the two of them, his usual humor softened by the gravity of the moment. Well, this changes things. Guess we'll need to prepare for a whole new kind of research. David laughed, his nervousness melting into excitement. Guess so, but it's a good kind of research. They walked together through the forest, Zara explaining what she knew about a Lari pregnancy. The physiology was different, but not entirely alien, and David felt a strange comfort in knowing that despite their differences, this journey was something they could navigate together. So, what happens next? Mike asked, breaking the silence. We plan, Zara replied. There will be challenges. My people will have questions, just as yours will. But together, I think we can find a way. David squeezed her hand, feeling a profound sense of responsibility and joy. We'll make it work. Whatever it takes. Mike grinned, clapping David on the shoulder. "Congrats, Dad. Didn't see this coming. But hey, life is full of surprises, right?" David chuckled, his eyes meeting Zura's. "Yeah, it certainly is." David had barely stepped into the station when he was called into a meeting with James. The commander's face was unreadable, but David could tell something was weighing on him. "David," James began once they were seated. "I've heard the news. I understand Zara is with child." "Yes, sir," David replied, a mix of pride and nerves in his voice. "It's unexpected, but we're both committed to making this work." James nodded thoughtfully, his fingers steepled in front of him. "David, you must understand the gravity of this situation. We're on the edge of uncharted territory here, diplomatically and biologically. There will be scrutiny from both sides." "I understand, James. But this child, it represents something important to both humans and Alari," David said earnestly. "We're taking every step carefully. Are you prepared for the challenges?" James asked, his gaze steady. "There will be people who don't understand, who fear what this child might mean." David met his eyes. "Yes, I'm ready. Zara and I are both ready. We'll face whatever comes together." James sighed, though there was a hint of pride in his expression. "Good. You'll have my support, David. But you should be prepared for resistance, both from our side and hers." Later that day, David met with Mike and Tom in the station's common area. They had gathered around a table, discussing the day's work when Mike finally brought up the subject. "So, Dad-to-be," Mike began, nudging David. "How are you holding up?" David chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Honestly, it's overwhelming. But Zara and I are ready to do whatever it takes." Tom nodded thoughtfully. "You two are stepping into some serious waters. There are bound to be complications, especially with the Alari elders." "Yeah," David admitted. "Zara mentioned there might be questions, maybe even doubts from her people. But we're going to face it all together." "Good thing you've got us," Mike said with a grin. "Because I'm telling you right now, anyone tries to give you trouble, they'll have to answer to me." David laughed, appreciating the camaraderie. "Thanks, Mike. I'm sure I'll need all the help I can get." Just then, Zara entered the room, her presence instantly calming David. She moved gracefully to his side, offering a gentle smile to the group. "Hello, everyone." "Zara," Tom greeted her with a nod. "We were just talking about the next steps." Zara's gaze shifted to David, and he could see the determination in her eyes. "I have spoken with some of our elders. They are curious but cautious. They wish to meet with you, David, to understand your intentions." David nodded, knowing this was inevitable. "I'm ready, Zara. Whatever they need to hear, I'll tell them." Mike grinned, slapping David's back. "Just charm them like you did, Zara, and you'll be fine." Zara laughed softly, but her expression turned serious as she looked at David. "It will not be easy. There are fears among my people, fears about mixing our lives so closely with yours. But I believe they will listen if we speak honestly." David took her hand, a silent show of solidarity. "We'll do it together. We'll show them there's nothing to fear." The next morning, David and Zara, accompanied by Mike and Tom for support, met with a small group of Alari elders near the edge of the station. The elders regarded David with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, their delicate features revealing little but their eyes watching closely. One of the elders, who introduced herself as Naylan, addressed David directly. "You are the father of this child?" "Yes," David replied, keeping his voice steady. "I am committed to Zara and to our child. We're both fully prepared to raise them with respect for both our cultures." Naylan studied him for a moment. "Do you understand what this means? For you? And for us?" "I do," David answered. "And I hope that this child can be a symbol of friendship, of unity between our people." The elders exchanged glances, and another, Rylan, stepped forward. "We will observe. Trust is earned, human, but we will watch and decide." With that, the elders left, leaving a weighty silence behind. As they walked back to the station, Mike clapped David on the shoulder. "You did good, Dave. You got this." Zara looked up at David, pride in her eyes. "Thank you for being so honest, so strong." David smiled, feeling the warmth of her support. "We'll face it all together." Months passed in a blur of preparations, discussions, and endless questions from both the humans and the Alari. David and Zara's child would soon be born, and the anticipation grew with each day. The station's main hall had been transformed into a space where both species could gather, a symbol of unity and collaboration. One evening, David, Mike, and Tom sat around a table in the common area, a small glass of earth-brewed whiskey in each of their hands. "To new beginnings," Mike said, raising his glass with a grin. "And to you, David, for being the bravest one of all of us." David chuckled, clinking his glass with theirs. "I think Zara deserves that title more than me. She's been handling all of this with so much strength." "True," Tom agreed, taking a sip. "But you've held your own. It's not every day you become a father to the first child between two species." David smiled, though a hint of nervousness flashed across his face. "Honestly, some days it feels surreal. I never expected any of this when I first arrived here." Just then, the door to the common area slid open, and Zara entered, her calm presence immediately filling the room. She was carrying a bundle of woven fabric, a traditional Ilari item meant for newborns. "David," Zara said, smiling softly, "I wanted you to see this. It is a gift from my people, for our child." David stood, taking the fabric carefully in his hands. It was intricately woven, the colors shifting subtly as he moved it under the light. "It's beautiful, Zara." "Thank you. I'm honored." Zara placed a hand gently on his arm. "It is our way of welcoming new life. Your people have been kind, and many Ilari now wish to share in our joy." Mike raised his glass again. "I'll drink to that. Welcome to the family, Zara." They all laughed, the mood light and joyful as they shared stories, their laughter filling the room. Tom leaned over to David, a grin on his face. "You know, if anyone had told me a year ago that I'd be here on an alien planet, toasting to a human Ilari child, I would have thought they'd lost it." David laughed, nodding. "Believe me, I feel the same way." The night passed in warmth and camaraderie, each of them feeling the weight of the journey they'd taken together. As David and Zara prepared to leave, Mike pulled David aside, his usual humor replaced by a rare moment of seriousness. "David, I just want you to know, whatever comes next, you're not in this alone. We're all here for you, Zara, and the little one." David clapped Mike on the shoulder. "Thanks, Mike. I couldn't have done this without you." The days that followed were filled with final preparations as Zara's due date approached. Finally, on a warm evening under Verdantia's twin moons, Zara went into labor. David, along with a team of human and Ilari medical staff, stayed by her side, supporting her through the long, intense hours. When the child was born, the room fell into a hushed silence. David held his breath as the Ilari healer gently wrapped the newborn in the woven fabric Zara had shown him. The tiny baby blinked up at him with wide eyes, a blend of Ilari and human features. It was a moment that felt both fragile and monumental, one that would echo far beyond the walls of their small station. "David," Zara whispered, reaching out to him. He took her hand, his eyes never leaving their child. "Zara, they're beautiful," he said softly, a sense of awe in his voice. "Our child, the first of their kind." The room erupted in quiet murmurs of celebration from both human and Ilari alike. Mike and Tom, who had been waiting outside, rushed in, their faces lighting up when they saw the baby. "Congratulations, Dad," Mike exclaimed, clapping David on the back. "Look at them, they're perfect." Tom nodded, his eyes warm. "Truly incredible, David. This is a new chapter for all of us." David, overcome with emotion, looked down at his child, then back at Zara, who was smiling at him, her eyes filled with pride and love. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. As they stood together, surrounded by friends from both worlds, David realized that their journey had only just begun. There would be challenges ahead, questions, and perhaps even fears to address. But he knew that with Zara by his side and their friends supporting them, they could face whatever came their way. Holding their child, David looked up at Zara, his voice filled with quiet determination. "We're ready, Zara, for whatever the future holds." Zara nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. "Yes, David. Together, we are ready."